Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard already. Shakur Stevenson versus Frank Martin for the vacant WBC lightweight world title is reportedly now agreed. As Bob Arum's Top Rank and TGB Promotions, on behalf of Al Heyman's PBC, have done a deal to stage it on a Top Rank ESPN show, purse bids for the match have been canceled.
TGB, I thought Frank Martin was a Man Down Promotions fighter.
Man Down Promotions is Errol Spence Jr.'s promotional company, though really, anything involving the PBC involves TGB, involves Tom Brown.
That the fight is going to the Top Rank and ESPN side of things comes as no surprise to me, because that's what I expected. That if they do fight, it's not going to be on the PBC's dime. It's going to be on Top Rank's dime.
Based on each outfit's investment in their particular fighter. When you look at what Shakur Stevenson is making, what Top Rank is paying him per fight, he's getting somewhere in between $2 to $3 million a fight. So they're very much invested in Shakur, whereas the PBC's investment in Frank Martin.
PBC don't pay Frank anywhere near what Top Rank pays Shakur per fight.
Frank's getting $100,000, maybe $2 per fight.
If that.
The fight with Shakur will likely pay Frank Martin more money than he's ever made on the PBC side of things.
For a title.
The PBC were not about to break the bank to bring Shakur Stevenson, bring this fight over to their side of things, because Shakur is worth a lot of money to the people over there at Top Rank.
Boxing insider Rick Glacier stated, another sign of Showtime and PBC's weakness. PBC makes a deal with Top Rank, avoiding the purse bid for the Frank Martin fight, to fight Shakur Stevenson on the ESPN platform.
Just like PBC did with Stephen Fulton, sending him to Japan with no purse bid. Huge sign of weakness for both Showtime and the PBC. And another loss coming for Martin's trainer, Derek James.
When it rains, it pours.
I think for the last 2 or 3 years, Derek James has been the recipient of Trainer of the Year in the sport of boxing. This year, his prize stallion, Errol Spence Jr., was beaten within an inch of his life, and now another unbeaten up-and-comer in his stable may be facing his first career loss.
When it rains, it pours.
Simple, really. It's what I told you. You will recall that Naoya Inoue was the mandatory challenger to Stephen Fulton, and the PBC elected to avoid that purse bid altogether and send Stephen to Japan straight away. It's important to note that Stephen wanted to go. He did want the fight.
He did.
But if the PBC themselves didn't fight hard to stage the match, it's because they knew they couldn't hope to win a purse bid against Top Rank, not for the Naoya Inoue fight. In this situation, it's the same deal.
When it comes to Shakur,
The PBC know they couldn't hope to win the purse bid for this match, so what they elected to do was agree to terms. Come to a deal independent of a purse bid in order to avoid it, because they're not going to break the bank just to keep Frank Martin on their side of things.
they don't pay him that much as it is.
For Frank Martin, who's 28, going on 29 years old, close to 30, this is a world title shot, a world title opportunity, and the PBC by themselves don't have any other world title shots for him. They don't have that much for him to do.
Alternatives.
He wasn't going to get Isaac Cruz in the ring or Gervonta Davis. Those two guys are supposed to be fighting each other. The most they could offer him in terms of a fight was an Edwin De Los Santos fight. And that's not a big fight at all. That's not a big fight. That's small potatoes compared to a Shakur Stevenson fight.
This is a title shot.
This guy's not getting any younger. He's inching closer and closer to 30 years old. He's not in a position where he can afford to walk away from a title shot, a world title opportunity, and a career-high purse.
Previous years, the PBC have been less than receptive to working with Top Rank, less than receptive to doing fights with them. Is that changing?
It is. Mostly because the PBC doesn't have two separate platforms giving them a budget anymore. Before, they had both Fox and Showtime, so they had more resources, more funding.
More fight dates.
Their stable of fighters was split. It was divided between Fox and Showtime, but now that Showtime has to accommodate all of those fighters due to Fox not renewing their deal with the PBC and leaving the sport of boxing,
Those fighters that were fighting on Fox, they're back on Showtime.
means they have that many more fighters to accommodate, that many more mouths to feed, and less resources, less overall to go around, to where you can't break the bank to do this fight. You can't break the bank.
Can't afford to.
You don't have that many alternatives for your fighter either. If you were to walk away from this fight, this mandated fight between Frank and Shakur, what would be Frank's alternative?
What would he do? Who would he fight?
Give a little bit of credit to Frank that if he didn't want the Stevenson fight, then we wouldn't be here, though in many ways, he doesn't have much of a choice. They don't have that many alternatives for him back there at the PBC. He's not getting Isaac, he's not getting Javante, and there's no point in fighting Edwin.
Or Chris Colbert, or any of the other guys they've got floating around 135. None of them can pay you what you'd make to fight Shakur.
Wouldn't be for a title.
You won't make fighting any one of them what you will make fighting Shakur.
Rolling the dice, I've no doubts. Shakur Stevenson will be the favorite with the odds makers, with the bookies.
Yeah.
And I like the fight. I like this fight a little more than I would have liked a George Kambosos fight for Shakur, a Jermaine Ortiz fight for Shakur.
The rivalry is why. The rivalry between the top-ranked stable and the PBC stable.
The Haymanites who like to beat on their chest and proclaim that Al Heyman has the best fighters. That's not what the stats show. The stats show that whenever PBC fighters go head-to-head with top-ranked fighters, they lose.
Top-ranked fighters are fighters that used to be top-ranked fighters, like Terrence Crawford.
Shakur Stevenson still very much is a top-ranked fighter. That Top Rank is very much invested in. Frank Martin is a good, unbeaten, serviceable fighter, but I don't think he has the ceiling that Shakur Stevenson has.
Shakur's been in the market for a decent fight. He wants to fight Devin. He wants to fight Vasil Lomachenko, George Kambosos.
Devin's fighting Regis. Vasil Lomachenko's supposed to be out for the rest of the year.
God knows what George is about to do. He's hinting at a big fight.
So I'll take it. I'll take Shakur Stevenson versus Frank Martin. It was a few weeks ago, 3 or 4, that Bob Arum denied Vasil Lomachenko was ducking Shakur S. Stevenson, saying he wants to take time off. Situation is still ongoing in Ukraine, the war between Ukraine and Russia.
Saying based on that, Vasil Lomachenko wants to take time off.
Arum, whose Top Rank Inc. promotes both fighters, made it clear in a recent interview that Lomachenko declined to fight with Stevenson for reasons that have mainly to do with the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, and not because Lomachenko is somehow unsettled by the prospect of their matchup.
Lomachenko is balking about fighting this year, not balking at a fight with Stevenson. He wants to take time off. The situation is still ongoing in Ukraine, and it's come close to where he lives with all of the bombing in Odessa. Really can't get focused on fighting. I don't think it has anything to do with Shakur.
I think it's the combination of things. I think two things can be true at the same time. The situation in Ukraine might at least be in part of why Vasil Lomachenko doesn't want to take another big fight straight away, but it's also the controversial loss to Devin Haney. That heartbreak, being so close and yet simultaneously so far away from your goal.
Lomachenko was robbed.
I think he was robbed, but it's not really about what I think. It's actually about what Vasil Lomachenko thinks, how Vasil Lomachenko feels. And he feels he was robbed. He feels he really won the fight. So the fact he wasn't awarded the decision, it's hard to muster up the moxie.
The fire, the desire to get back in there and face another top-level lightweight.
He's not in the frame of mind, the right frame of mind, to do that off this controversial loss to Devin Haney. Arum confirmed the plan is for Stevenson to fight in mid-November in Las Vegas on the same weekend when the F1 Las Vegas Grand Prix takes place.
He said this a few weeks ago. A few weeks later, the Frank Martin fight is made. Are we to assume that that fight is going to take place in November in Las Vegas, the weekend of the F1 Grand Prix?
For Shakur Stevenson, this will be his second fight of this year. Young Shakur has been boxing roughly 2 times a year, on average 2 times a year for the last 3 going on 4 years.
If you're telling yourself that Shakur should be fighting more, maybe 3 to 4 times a year, the reason he's only fighting 2 is because it's so expensive.
He's making on average approximately $3 million a fight. So you put him out there 2 times, that's $6 million you spent in a year to get that kid out there. You send him out there 3 times, that's $9 million.
It's a lot of money.
As it pertains to Shakur Stevenson and what would have been a Vasil Lomachenko fight, Bob says,
I don't know about Stevenson being avoided, but we're gonna get the best possible opponent, and he's gonna fight for the WBC title.
it seems that Bob has fulfilled that promise. Shakur Stevenson made his lightweight debut back in April when he stopped Shuichiro Yoshino of Japan in 6 rounds at the Prudential Center in Stevenson's hometown of Newark, New Jersey.
He's fighting Frank Martin now.
This news of the Frank Martin fight being agreed to is arriving right on time at a time when things were looking bleak for Shakur Stevenson, that things weren't working out with Devin Haney and they weren't working out with George Kambosos or Vasyl Lomachenko.
Frank has a bit of a cult following.
Mostly because of who promotes him, mostly because he's part of the same stable as Errol Spence Jr., Jermel Charlo, Derek James's boys.
Ryan Garcia, Anthony Joshua.
Frank Martin has become more and more talked about the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months, and that's mostly because of Errol Spence Jr., who promotes him. More so than any one performance that Frank put on. The buzz around him had more to do with Errol than Frank.
Not saying that Frank's a bad fighter. He's not a bad fighter. He's actually pretty good, but he's not on Shakur Stevenson's level.
What is this battle of the Southpaws? Shakur Stevenson, the Southpaw, as well as Frank Martin. Shakur Stevenson's base style and how adaptable he is, how malleable.
Shakur on points is the logical way to go.
Frank is a short, stumpy, sturdy lightweight. Strong puncher, too, but he ain't got Shakur's ring savvy. He ain't got his ring IQ.
Had mixed feelings about how Frank looked with Jackson Marinez. Jackson Marinez, an orthodox fighter who was landing far too many right hands for me on Frank Martin.
The saving grace being that Jackson Marinez is not a heavy-handed puncher, though if he were landing the number of right hands that he was landing, that could have been bad news for Frank Martin. Frank ended up stopping the guy. He redeemed himself with his performance against Michel Rivera. He completely outclassed,
Dominated Michel Rivera.
but then went back to looking human, went back to looking less than spectacular with Artem Haratunian. Not but a few weeks ago, some suggested that Artem, in spite of fading down the stretch, he had done enough to win the fight.
Fight against Frank Martin. Frank's fighting Shakur now.
Yeah, Frank's got good speed. I don't think he's faster than Shakur or more accurate, but he does have decent speed and good power. Very good power. He's a strong puncher.
So is Nicotila.
Shakur Stevenson, who fought a very cautious fight against Nicotila, who was a noticeably tall fighter and long fighter for 130 pounds. If he was able to work around Nicotila's size and length and power,
He can work around Frank.
Frank's a short, stumpy guy. He punches hard, but given Shakur Stevenson's movement, his height, his length, his speed, his ring savvy, I'm sure that he can keep Frank Martin on the outside.
Pecking away at him.
Pot-shotting him from the outside, not allowing him to get within striking distance to use that power, because he does punch hard.
Stevenson on points. That's the logical way to go.
In a fight that is made interesting due to the promotional and platform rivalries between the PBC and Top Rank, ESPN and Showtime.
Be honest, this is a more interesting fight than a George Kambosos fight would have been. We all know that George, he should have lost to Maxie Hughes.
Yeah.
He got a gift.
You need a gift decision against Maxie Hughes. What's Shakur Stevenson gonna do to you?
Yeah.
I like this fight more than I would have liked the George Kambosos fight, a little more than I would have liked the Jermaine Ortiz fight because of the rivalry.
What is a battle of the unbeatens and the battle of the southpaws?
I like the fight.
What about Loma?
He's supposed to be taking the rest of the year off. It is what it is.
Looking ahead.
Shakur Stevenson says the Tank Davis fight will be the world's biggest fight if and when it happens, though myself, I doubt that fight ever takes place. I doubt that fight happens because Gervonta Davis seems to be back up to his old tricks, his old ways, after having scored a career-high purse with Ryan Garcia in what we all thought would be a big fight.
Look at who he's fighting. He's fighting Isaac again.
It's a matter of when and not if Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis will meet in a much discussed and desired fight. That's according to the 26-year-old Stevenson, who stated that a super slugfest with the 28-year-old knockout artist Gervonta Davis, who's almost 30, should be happening sometime soon. There's only one fight that interests me all around boxing. Me and Tank will be the biggest boxing fight in the world when it happens, Stevenson said on the Second Win podcast.
If it happens.
Manuk Akopiang described the fight between them as a much discussed and much desired fight. The fight is definitely discussed by boxing fans, but it's only really desired.
Shakur Stevenson wants it. Gervonta Davis doesn't. Just call a spade a spade.
Yeah, Shakur wants it. and the fans want it. The fans would like to see it, many of them. But Gervonta Davis himself and his team, they're more focused on fighting Isaac again. Why?
It's the devil that you know.
Isaac is a limited fighter. We all know that. We took stock of it when he faced Brian Cabrera in his last fight. He didn't look good in that fight.
It's the devil that you know.
For Gervonta it is. He could approach that fight with the comfort of knowing that he's fought this man before and beat this man before. That's what it is. 135 or 140. I don't know what weight the fight will happen, but not 147. I can see it happening not too far in the future. I think Tank will sign the contract, and I'm going to sign the contract too. It's going to happen. There's no denying the fact that it's going to happen. Fans are wanting it right now, but it kind of takes time to make stuff happen. We'll see. I think it's going to happen in the near future. At the end of the day, real boxing fans know that this is a crazy fight. There's no denying that I'm going to be one of the biggest superstars in the sport of boxing when we clash. It's going to be crazy. I can't wait.
You're gonna have to.
Because I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for Gervonta Davis to fight Shakur Stevenson. I wouldn't.
You know, I'd sooner expect them to bring up Brandon Figueroa from 126 all the way up to 135.
Before they'd make a Shakur Stevenson fight, I'd sooner expect them to drag up Brandon Figueroa up to lightweight from featherweight to face Gervonta Davis so they can stay on easy street and stay on their side of things where Gervonta is safe.
Story is he might end up fighting Isaac again this fall.
Beyond an Isaac Cruz fight, MMA fighter in the UFC, Sean O'Malley, has taken a liking to calling out Gervonta Davis. And I would sooner expect Gervonta to fight Sean O'Malley in a novelty fight, a circus fight, than Shakur Stevenson in a real one.
Think about it. If Tyson Fury, a sitting champion, a reigning champion in the heavyweight division, can put all of that on hold for a circus fight with Francis Ngannou, what's stopping Gervonta from doing the same thing?
Nothing.
Nada.
And he's shameless enough to do it. He's shameless enough to avoid the real competition at or around his weight for another big price, another big payday. He only fought Ryan Garcia because not only was Ryan beatable, but he had a big following.
The least risks for the most rewards.
It's the only reason they took a break from feasting on no-hopers on their own side of things and decided to fight a Golden Boy Promotions fighter instead. It's because Ryan, he's a fighter of limited ability who's very popular. So in him, you get the most rewards for the least risks. That's not the situation with a Shakur Stevenson.
Shakur is a better fighter by and large than Ryan, a better fighter, but he doesn't have as big a following. So that is a very unattractive fight to Gervonta and his team.
I think they would elect to exhaust all other avenues, all other options, before they would elect to do a fight with Shakur. That's what I think. So where Shakur is optimistic, I'm not.
Why the fuck would I be? For how many years did we hear empty promises of a solo Lomachenko fight?
You know, before it became about Loma versus Lopez or Loma versus Haney, it was first about Loma versus Davis. Never materialized. And I don't think this will either.
Stevenson versus Davis.
Ultimately, I believe they would exhaust any and every other option before they would elect to make a fight with Shakur.
It's too dangerous.
And there's not enough in it for them.